Okay, everybody, we'll make a start because we've got a very big night tonight, and I want to try and keep the announcements down to a short number because we've got a lot of images, and Brad likes to give lots of commentary, but we won't have enough time for all of that, and I'll come to that. Now, the main item to announce tonight is that we need an activities coordinator. Marilyn will be retiring at the end of the year, so this is a time for one of you to volunteer to have a handover from Marilyn over these remaining months, because if nobody volunteers, we won't have any social outings next year. So it's an important role. Marilyn's done a marvellous job with organising the activities, and there'll be big shoes to fill. And you probably don't need to organise as many, but at least we need to have somebody organise the images. So some of the items that are coming up, which you may have been seeing on the slideshow, is that on Thursday the 29th, that's coming, is the Hawkesbury Race Day, which is a great way to get some images of horses coming across the post. And I've seen some of those images do very well in competitions. Then we've got on the first Tuesday of the month, we've got a lecture night presented by Dr. Glenn Porter, who's a forensic scientist, or a photographer, sorry, and the subject is decay. So decay and forensics could conjure up all sorts of things of what he might be talking about on the night. He has mentioned the body farm, where there actually are bodies that are buried to observe the amount of decay under various conditions. So it could be a very interesting presentation, that. Then on Sunday the 9th of October is the sunrise at Birchgrove Oval. Then on Tuesday the 11th, our new training coordinator has organised a smartphone photography and editing using Snapseed and mastering composition for smartphones. So these are just the basics as a good training intro to smartphone photography, and that will be Alonso Calero will be giving that. On Tuesday the 18th is the Portrait SIG meeting. This is going to be an interesting meeting because it's going to be in this room. There is going to be a live band here that will be able to photograph for 2 or 3 hours, and using on-camera flash, your flash, and learning how to photograph a gig, and that will be quite interesting. You don't have to be a member of the Portrait SIG. You've got to be a member of the club, of the photography club, but you're all welcome to come. And then on Saturday the 22nd of October is Chrome Fest up at the entrance, and that is a magical day where there's lots of cars, old cars, people dress up, there's rock and roll bands and dancers, 1950s clothing, the whole box and dice. So if you've never been to Chrome Fest, you've been missing something. So we now move on to the main event tonight, which is the Nightscapes competition. And as you've been aware, when I looked at the number of entries on the Monday morning, when it closes on Tuesday evening, there were 28 images. So I put out an urgent call, and we now have 116 images. So I thank everybody for responding to that call, and we've had people who haven't submitted an image for in the time I think I've been in the club. So I really do appreciate that people did respond to that request. The issue is going to be that Brad is a person who likes to give commentary, and I've had to tell him we've had to cut back on the amount that he will give. And so that will be a bit of a struggle. Now, I'd also like to announce that one of the members who has joined the external competition SIG group and has been going into externals and gaining some success. John O'Farrell has just managed to get to his lapse level, which is 50 acceptances and a couple of other requirements, but he has over 100 acceptances now and 13 awards, which means that he could probably go for the next level up, which is the APS, the Associate of the Australian Photographic Society. So people who have thought when they're sitting there, I will never be able to do that, people are doing that and succeeding. So if you haven't thought about going into externals, think about it, because a lot of people in the club are becoming getting acceptance, good results. Now, normally Keith McGoffrin is running the Lightroom, but Keith is off and about somewhere into the wilderness, and New Zealand. Well, I was talking about wilderness. So I will be running it. I have done it before, but there will be some hiccups along the way, so please bear that in mind. So I'll just introduce Brad. You know that I've been mentioning beforehand a number of times the Northern Photographic Federation, and Brad is the person who runs the Northern Photographic Federation, and he had decided that Castle Hill could be part of that federation. And we had a number of people go up to that weekend, had a great weekend. We had a number of members who got some awards from the competition, and people got lucky door prizes and all sorts of things. So it's not just a weekend of just seeing people presenting. There's a lot of activity. Put it in your diary for next year. I think it's going to be a little earlier next year.
Probably the end of July.
The end of July, so bear that in mind.
Last weekend in July is what I'm going to aim for.
Yeah, and Curry's not that far away, actually. Or you can go up and stay, which a number of us did. Now, Brad we've had before, and he's a very experienced photographer, particularly with Nightscapes. He does a lot of that. He is one of the few people I know that shoots Pentax, but he does it very, very successfully. And I think, Brad, you've got an observatory in your place?
Backyard.
Yep. So he's very seriously into night photography. So rather than keep the night going, I'll make a start. Oh, sorry. I'll hand over to Brad if he wants to introduce himself.
Yeah, okay. So Peter invited me down. I've judged at this club a couple of times, and thank you for inviting me again. I'll just change my glasses so I can see you instead of being blurry blobs. I've judged on Zoom a couple of times over the last few years. Like everybody else with COVID, I've not judged in person for several years, so I'm likely to be a bit rusty, and you guys have quite a different awards structure, so I'm sure that if I start getting things wrong, Peter will jump on me. So you're just going to run through these, are you, Pete, first?
So this is the B-grade set images.
Okay, so you'd like me to make comments now? Yes. All right. So this is a nice image. It's a fairly common technique, putting something in the foreground, light painting, and then capturing the Milky Way. In this case, the Milky Way's been very well captured. I'm a bit of a stickler for the colours in the Milky Way being correct. One way that you can do that is to set your camera to sun when you're shooting Milky Way, and that way you'll get the correct colours. A lot of people tend to hit the cool slider. The Milky Way is actually extremely warm coloured, like you can see up there. So that's a very good example. What I'm going to try and do tonight is I'll spend a little bit more time on the B graders. The A graders I'll tend to limit my comments. Okay. So overall, very nice image, and that one I think can have a merit. All right. So this one fits nicely with the category. You've chosen to look at the foreground. You've captured the colour very well. It hasn't been. You haven't really It's very easy to oversaturate the colours in an image like this. If you look at the restaurant just above that green section there, you can see that the lighting is actually looking quite natural still, which means that you've handled it pretty well. That one will be a credit. All right, so this one is obviously taken with a very wide-angle lens. You can see a little bit of, there's a bit of geometric distortion in here with the church looking like that. And another problem that you'll find with wide-angle lenses, if you look at the stars, the very bright stars up the top, the pointers, whatnot, you'll get some chromatic aberration around them, which is like a bit of purple fringing, and that's difficult to get rid of if you're using particularly a zoom lens. That's other than that, it's a fairly nice image. It's fairly well seen. Looks like a single shot. Doesn't look like you've composited or done anything like that. So well done, and that will be a credit. All right, this is a shot that we're all very familiar with. It's nicely done. I like the fact that you've got that ferry in front of the Opera House. It just gives you a little anchor point to go down to. You've got the tall buildings on either side with Barangaroo and whatever that new building is going up at the back there. We see an awful lot of images these days of the Vivid Festival. So it's kind of nice to see one that's not vivid. You've taken this at the Blue Hour, so you've managed to maintain some nice cloud behind, so the sky's just not a big empty blob. So that one would be a credit as well. All right, I'm not sure what building. Oh, this actually looks a bit like the fountain up in Newcastle, but whether it is or not, I'm not sure. You're showing me the scene. There's a fair bit of difference or dynamic range between the bright spots in the image and the dark parts. You've managed to keep detail in most of the image, except perhaps. Oh, by the way, I'm looking at a 4K monitor here, which has much better tonal range than you've got up there. So, for instance, on my monitor, I can see detail in here, and I can see detail right the way through here. The only places that I'm really starting to lose a bit of detail is this black area in here. The rest of it is, you can't even see in this image, you can't even see the building behind. So I can actually see up in here, there's a detailed building there. So it's a lot, and there's actually still detail in the sky on the image that I'm looking at here as well. So the only thing I would say is with this, there's a little bit of noise beginning to creep into the image in the sky, and that's a pretty easy fix in Photoshop these days. So that is an accepted, is it? Acceptance. All right. So this image has got some lovely reflections in it. I think you've taken it at a good time of the evening, very early evening, obviously. It's got some lovely metallic sheen on Barangaroo there, and this building in here on my monitor, that metallic look in there really grabs your eye and drags you straight into it. little or the giant crystal Christmas bauble thing in the front, I think, is probably more of a distraction than it does help the image, because it makes you scratch your head and wonder why it's there. But overall, I think it's well handled. The noise has been very well controlled, and the toning is nice, and that will be a credit. All right, so this image has some good stuff, and it has some stuff that's a bit questionable. All right, so you've done well to capture the whole Milky Way. Whether you've done it in, I suspect that it's been several shots that you've stitched together, because you haven't got too badly with the lens distorting the geometry. In fact, now that I look at it more closely, I can see on my monitor, I can see where there's a stitch line down here, where the so the trick with these images is to set your camera to manual. Don't let your auto white balance take over, because what will happen is as you pan your camera around across the horizon, it'll adjust your white balance, and then it makes it difficult to stitch. So that's the first thing. The other thing I would say is, you can see, can you guys see those rays there? Okay, and there, that is auto lens correction. So when you're processing it and you put it into Photoshop or Lightroom, if you've got your software or the software in your camera set to correct the geo distortions on your lens, when you come to stitch it, that's what will happen. It took me months to work that out, right? Because I tend to do a lot of, so when I do an image like this that's stacked, I'll often do like 3 images here, 3 images there, 3 images there, 3 images there, and then stack them that way first and then stitch them together, right? And that gets rid of the noise. But you get that thing. And the only other thing I would say is, too, you've obviously sharpened it a reasonable amount, because on this monitor here, but you can see it here, you can see the haloing, all right? Now that wouldn't be so obvious, except that that's a prominent silhouette right on the thing, right? It's an ambitious photograph, and I think 10 points for having a good go at it. And this is B grade, so I'm prepared to be a bit lenient and overlook all of those things. Judging by the vegetation, I'd say this looks like Africa or Namibia or somewhere like that, Kenya maybe. So well done, and I think I would probably give that a credit just because of the technical difficulty I know that's involved. However, there are some technical issues with this. With a bit of time, you could probably correct most of the issues, I think. All right, so this is another one of those images with complicated rusty old piece of farm machinery in the foreground that's been light painted. Instead of putting stars in the background, you've put a nice cloudy. You've resisted the idea of using a sunset, which is good, and there's a bit of detail in the sky. You've perhaps oversaturated it a bit, I would say, and if we were judging up there, you'd be fine. On the 4K monitor, you can see up there. Can you see the white spots? They're just hot pixels, which a lot of cameras have, and you often don't notice them until you really start pushing your sensors like you're doing with a Nightscape. So I would suggest that they're really easy to clone out. Overall, a nice image. It's probably just a little oversaturated, really, and that's an easy fix in processing. I think with that one, we'll give it an accepted. All right, this is an interesting take on the Opera House, and I quite like it. It looks like the overseas terminal down in Sydney. I think it's quite a clever shot. I like the sky. It's getting a little bit noisy. I like the black and white presentation. I think it suits it. It gives it foreboding. And I actually quite like the way you've butted the Opera House up against the building, and you've got those sort of variegated reflections there. It's a clever use of what was there. And let's face it, 90% of us would go down and just take a shot of the Opera House. I think this is a merit all day, every day. All right, the Paul Wild Observatory. That's what that looks like to me out at Narrabri. It's a nice enough presentation, nice shot of the Milky Way. I think you need to probably revisit it and look at the coloration. Do you remember I said that the Milky Way is quite warm? The temptation when you're sitting in front of your computer at home is you go, oh no, that looks, I'll make that cooler. And that's what you've done. There's virtually no blue in the Milky Way. There are stars that are blue, right? There's hot white blue stars, big ones. But that all that haze you can see around the Milky Way, the only place you're getting really close to the real colour is that in there, but most of it is actually probably closer to the colour of that. And I would suggest that if you went for the natural colour, it would probably even complement this a bit better. Now, having said that, I sort of know what the Milky Way is, and I look at it a lot and all that sort of stuff. You can make an artistic decision, and 99% of the population are going to look at it and they're not going to know anything that's wrong with it. You just got a bit unlucky tonight that you've got someone who's a bit of a pedant when it comes to the night sky. So anyway, so I would probably give that an accepted. I think that if you handled the sky a little bit better, it would have been much higher up in the awards. All right, the first thing that hits you in the face here is it's nightscape, and the sky is a little bit, you can't see it up there on this monitor. It's not very forgiving, and the sky is a little bit noisy. However, having said that, the symmetry of the boats is nice, and the noise isn't evident in the boats, and that's what my eye is dragged down to. Like away from the sky, I would say that's an accepted. All right, this is a good use of a time lapse type of shot. I'm guessing we're talking about, it looks like there's a reasonable amount of traffic. We're probably talking maybe a 20-second exposure, something like that. Because it's not enough to flatten the water, and I can sort of see there's a little ferry in the corner here that you probably can't see on this screen. So it's telling me that it's not that long an exposure, but it's certainly, from a technical point of view, it's long enough for those headlights and tail lights to make that nice swirly pattern on the road. I think it's a really lovely shot. There's a leading line into this big swirl, and then we've got the bridge up on top as a highlight to anchor us. So your eye comes in and sort of moves around. So there's plenty to look at, and I think that's actually a merit, that one. All right, another one from the Paul Wild Observatory. This is a bit further along the track. This is number 4. Different angle, nice detail down in the actual telescope itself. And you've tried to position yourself so the Milky Way looks like it's sort of coming out of the dish. The Milky Way is a little bit cool for my taste, but I would give this one a credit. All right, so this is a desaturated version of the Opera House looking across the harbour. And obviously what you're trying to show me is the reflections in the water from the cityscape. So it's nicely done. It's I wouldn't say that it's outstanding in that it's the sort of shot that a lot of people would take. I think what you've done, what is actually the most impressive to me about it is you try and get a shot of Sydney Harbour, this part of the harbour, without a boat on it. All right, so that is quite impressive. The shot hasn't been that long that you've lost all the detail in the water surface. So it's a couple of seconds, and you've needed to do that so that you don't have a lot of noise. Overall, it's nice. That's an accepted. All right, this one. So you've got the looking down to the south. So I'm assuming that what I'm looking at here is the southern aurora, or the aurora australis, which is this coloured part here. All right, which our aurora in Australia is often red and orange. If you've got a really clear night, you'll actually get purples and things up here, which is good. That's the Large Magellanic Cloud up there. So that's how I know that we're looking south, right? And that looks like Eta Carina in there. It's nicely done. It's a fairly noisy shot. So the foreground down here is extremely noisy, and I think you could clean that up with not too much trouble. You just need to watch a couple of YouTubes, and there's guys on there that'll tell you how to do it, and that would bring a lot more detail in this foreground up. Is the author here tonight? I'm just wondering where it is. No, not here. Okay. Look, despite the noise, I'm happy to give that a credit. I think it's a really nice shot. These aurora are actually quite difficult to get. They don't hang around in Australia very much like they do up in the Northern Hemisphere, where you get those beautiful green, the aurora borealis and all that sort of stuff. All right, this is a nice clean shot. There's no noise at all in the image on this 4K screen. I actually like the fact that there's a blurry person in here. Can you see it there? Yeah. So on my screen, this person really stands out, but it actually looks really nice. It reminds me of some of the European classics from bygone days. The central line up the middle sort of matches the building. I may have cut just a little bit off the bottom. I don't know that I need that line to be quite so big. I mean, I probably might have cropped it along there, because there's not a lot. I mean, you're showing me some detail, but there's not a lot going on down there. The main interest is really what's happening up in here, and you've managed to catch that really nicely. And that centre line, even though everyone says rule of thirds and all that, this kind of breaks that rule, but does it in a nice way. And the light flares you've got around each of the street lights, I think, just adds to the image. That's a merit. All right, the old star trail. I have in my time done an awful lot of these, and you've got a few planes flying across. They're a pain in the bum to get out of an image. You can do it. This one has been done with multiple images stacked by the looks of it as well. I haven't got time to go into how I can sort of tell that or whatever, but we'll give this an accepted. It's a nice image. I think that this is one of those little arts in photography that the more often you do it and the longer you do it for, the better you get at it. So this is a really good opportunity to pull colours out of the stars. If we had more time, I could show you a couple where you'd go, those colours aren't natural. And I go, well, they are, because there's all sorts of different coloured stars up there, but it's a bit of a knack to doing it. So yeah, that's an accepted image tonight. All right, so this is another piece of farm equipment in front of the rising Milky Way. You've done reasonably well. The Milky Way is nicely coloured. I can actually even see a little bit of colour in. So this is my litmus test. Is that star there is called Antares, and that is an orange-red star, and it's the same colour as Mars. So it's a real kind of really rich red. if I can see colour in that star, that tells me that you've exposed really well, and I can just start to see a bit of colour creeping through. The light painting on the windmill may be a little bit harsh compared to the background, so the contrast between the two. I think if you toned the windmill down just a little bit, you'd balance up between the Milky Way and that background a bit better. That will be an accepted, that one. All right, so we've got another cityscape with an opera house, and I mean, we live fairly close to the city, so it's one of those things. This one probably from a technical point of view hasn't been handled quite as well. There's quite a lot of noise in the image. Again, I'm looking at a 4K screen here rather than the projector does a beautiful job of hiding some of the noise. Which, you know, I mean, in our club, if I've got images that are slightly noisy, the judge is not looking at it on a 4K screen, they're just looking at that, then you can get away with it a bit. But having said that, you've managed to keep a little bit of detail up in the clouds, and you've done reasonably well. It's a nice wide shot, and you haven't got geometric distortion going on to a great degree, so that's kind of well done. And the bluey purpley colour in the reflection in the harbour there off that building is quite nicely handled too, so I'll give that an accepted as well. All right, so this is actually a nicely handled photograph of a fairly simple scene. So it would be very easy to for this part of the image to be really oversaturated, and your eye just follows that up, and on the 4K screen there's a bit of detail up in here that I can see. So, and you've got this, so the foreground's all nicely done. There's better detail on the 4K monitor, and there's a bit of detail in here, but your eye just hits that, follows it up straight to the building, and there's actually a payoff when you get there, because there's a fair bit of detail in that building on this monitor. So that's actually a nicely, for a nightscape, it's a nicely done version of a fairly simple scene, so I'm actually going to give that one a merit. So when we get to the A grades, I'm not going to have the luxury of giving you as much information. All right, so look, I think for me, they're all well deserving of merits. It's out of the opera house, the black and white, and the twirly road, which is, what's that, the Anzac Bridge. So that's the road leading. Is that the Anzac Bridge or not? Oh, it's Shanghai, is it? Yeah, look, it's a bit of a coin toss. I think I'm actually going to give it to the Opera House, simply because I like the fact that you've shown me something that I'm extremely familiar with, and you've managed to show it to me in a way that I've not seen it before. And I think that needs to be rewarded. The Shanghai overpass is very, very well done as well, and I'm happy with that. And that last image that we looked at, this one down here, again, it's a really simple image, but it's beautifully done. And I think for a B grader, you're showing a lot of skills. But I think the Opera House gets it tonight. The other thing to note too is that the aspect ratio is slightly different between these two. On this monitor, that image is slightly squashed that way and slightly pulled out that way a little bit. It looks a little bit unnatural up there, actually. Like the Opera House looks too upright, but the proportions are actually correct on this monitor that I'm looking at.
Okay, I'll just do it. I'll be doing the announcements tonight. So first of all, congratulations to Jerry Jenkins for the Opera House. And now we'll do the merits. Abandoned, Linda Frost. Nampu Bridge, Lisa Harris. St Peter's Basilica, Jan Lambert. And the Boardwalk, Ian Munro. And the credits are Bridge to Clark Quay, Jim Chu. Church of the Good Shepherd, Starry Night, Lisa Harris. City Lights, Frank Mullins. Darling Harbour, Terry Jenkins. And Desert Sky, Terry Lilly. Night Watching, Andy Kershaw. Sky on Fire, Eric Chung. And the Acceptances, Civic Park at Night, Ian Munro. Farm Machinery, Robert Dechnik. Looking Up, Andy Kershaw. Luxurious Boats, Eric Chung. And Silver and Gold, got to get this one right, Sinfendora, Sinderdorfer, my apologies for that. Simpfendorfer, thank you. Simpfendorfer. Star Trails in Sawtell, Barry Frost. Starry Night, Linda Frost. And Sydney Lights, Inner Spell.
Gee, there's a few. Okay, so we've got a night scene and a cemetery. And someone down in the bottom left there holding up a torch or source of illumination. Not a bad shot. We're into A grade now, so I would say that the standard needs to jump up a little bit. It looks like to me, the way the sky's been handled, again on this 4K screen, that some sort of a filter has been put on this as well. So I'd suggest that perhaps it's been a bit noisy and you've thought, well, I'll put a filter on it and that'll control that. That's an accepted. All right, so this is obviously vivid, and I expect that we'll see a lot of these. The shutter speed has been reasonably high because you can see in the foreground there's a fair bit of detail in the water. If you look at the buildings on the horizon on the right, you can see that there's, it's a fairly wide angle lens and they're not actually sharp. Now, that may have been because you're standing on a boat or you're hand holding it, whatever the reason. I like the crisscrossing pattern in the sky. I think that's nice. It's put something up there rather than black. But I think there's a few technical issues with the image. That's an accepted. All right, so I would figure this is probably from the Carl Expressway, so you're up off Circular Quay. Again, at Vivid, you've got nice detail in Luna Park. You've got some nice, so the actual shutter speed's been relatively high. You'll notice that you can't see it, but on my 4K screen, those lines, the striations from the auto lens correction in the software or the camera is all over this image. It's right around. So that's a bit problematic when you're looking at it. You can't really see it so much up there, but you can definitely see it on this screen here. It's really obvious. That's going to be an accepted. It's actually quite noisy too, this image. So you've ramped up the ISO. Okay, so this is a better version of the Opera House and the Harbour Bridge. Obviously a lot longer exposure. There could be more than one exposure here that's been stacked, who knows, although there is a little bit of noise still evident. But the exposure's been long enough to smooth out the water and the foreground. This one's a credit. All right, so this is looks like a rail bridge over a local creek or something like that. You had to go at the Milky Way. There's a bit of cloud in the sky which hasn't been playing particularly nicely for this sort of shot. It's a very wide angle lens. This would be an accepted. All right, this is a simpler image. It's a reasonably long shot. It's got beautiful tones right up through it. You've given me just enough of the deck of the bridge to put a base on the photograph. And there's a little bit of movement in the flag up there on the top that just lets me know that it's a longer exposure. I'm happy to give this one a credit. It's nicely balanced and it's a simple shot that's been fairly well seen. All right, I would suggest that there's nice detail in the rocks, but maybe a little bit too much of the rock that sort of dominates the image. And tonight, the set subject is Nightscapes. So if this was my image and I was putting it in, you've got really nice colour up in here. Can you see that Antares now? You can see a bit more colour in there. There's a bit of purple and a bit of yellow around Antares. That tells me that your exposure is actually quite nice. I think that if you gave me that much of the rock, I would probably be happier, because what tends to happen with this is I'm dragged down and I'm looking at this, and this is where the action is, right? I would say a little bit of excessive sharpening there has put a few, like if that's going to be a feature of the image, you need to be critical of your own images, and if there are halos around things, you need to be cognizant of that. And funnily enough, the halos are much more evident on the projected image than they are on the 4K here. Having said all of that, I'm happy actually to give this one a merit simply because the sky has been handled very well. I don't know whether you've composited it together or not. I suspect that there's a chance you may have, but it's a nice image, aside from just cut about 20% off the bottom, and I think you'd actually have lift it to a better image. All right, so this is a nice country scene. Couple of boys. I can't see close enough to see whether they've actually got beers going there or not, but they've got their buggy, they've got the night sky behind them. It's a nice enough image. This one will get a credit. You've handled would be easy to blow the details on that caravan with the light sources right there, and I think you've handled it pretty well. All right, the back of Bombo Rocks and Milky Way Rising. This one does look like it's a composite. And if you ask me afterwards how I can tell it's a composite, there's a few little tricks you can do so that it becomes difficult to tell. There's a fair bit of noise right down low on the foreground, which you can't see here, but there's actually on mine, there's detail right through here, but it is very, very noisy. The Milky Way, the colours are actually quite nicely handled, and again, my little telltale, that's Antares there, so that area there, and that shadow streaking up into there. That's the other reason that I can tell that it's a composite, is because when you're looking east, that comes up before that does. So that's been taken looking probably west, and you've composited together. But 99% of judges are not going to know that. So again, I'm happy to overlook that, and that's a credit. This is an interesting shot. It sort of leapt out at me when I first looked at it, and I thought maybe it's not a composite, and it breaks a lot of the rules. But I'm happy for you to break the rules when it's done well. I would probably again have cut just a little bit of this white section. This is obviously ground mist or something here, right? And it really does drag your eye down, and you want me to look at this now. If you look at my 4K screen there's a lot of mist around here, and there's beams of shadows coming off this where the light source is down behind that rock. I actually, and it's a little bit noisy, but I think that you've had a really good go, and with a little bit more processing, I think there's a bit of a gem in there. So I'm happy to give that one a credit. All right, a star trail with the bridge in the foreground and some snow. Look, I'm guessing, but it's probably New Zealand or somewhere like that. It's a nicely handled shot, and I like the way that the diagonal line goes from left to right on those mountains. And when you get up to the top to this white section up here, there's actually a lot of detail up there, and the noise, it's a bit, on the projected image, it's very blotchy in here. It's not so bad on the 4K screen. So again, I'd be happy to give that one a credit. All right, so this one here has nice leading lines. It's got some beautiful colours and reflections. The noise has been very well handled. I mean, there's virtually no noise in it, even on the 4K screen. It's a very simple image, and it's a local image. I mean, I look at that and I know exactly where it is, right? But I'm happy to give that a merit simply because I think from a technical point of view, everything about it's right. If I was going to say to you, well, what would I do to improve it? If you had something in the sky, that would help. And if you got rid of that white line there, because we don't need that mobile phone tower there, right? So, and that would be such an easy clone. You could clone that out, right? The other reason I say it's very well handled is this would be a classic image to wind up with halos around everything, and I can't see any halos around any of it. So it's as sharp as a tack, but there's no halos. So very well done. All right, this is a nice enough version of this. I would cut a little bit of the foreground water off, because you're trying to show me you know, this is all nice and sharp, and this is all nice and sharp. That's what you're trying to show me. You've got some nice reflections in here, but there's a fair bit of texture in there as well. So I probably would have taken it off across there so that that's the star of the show. But I still think it deserves a merit. All right, this is a very, very dark image. It's a cityscape. There's not a terrible amount of detail in the city, and you're obviously showing me the reflections, and there's not a great deal. This would have looked a lot better with a lot longer exposure than it's got. And it's also a fairly noisy shot, and compared to the rest of the images that we're looking at, it's probably not quite up to par, I don't think. So I think we'll just move to the next image. All right, this one has a bit of noise in it, but it's not so much that we couldn't handle it with a bit of software. The Milky Way's been nicely handled. You can see a little bit of colour in that star. I wonder where it is, because you're obviously looking west, I'd say, by the look of it. This area here is somewhat distracting. I mean, I don't know that you need to have that in there. I can see what it is. It's like a barbecue area and a chimney type thing. I don't know that it's necessary, because it doesn't provide the edge of a frame or anything. It just pulls your eye straight to it, and you're ignoring this, and it's a nightscape. That's what you're trying to show me. You don't want me looking at that. You want me looking at that, right? So I would have probably either tone it right down or cut it out. That's accepted, that one. All right, this is a very, very dark image of the Harbour Bridge. You've lost most of the detail in. Obviously shot it vivid. It even says vivid down there to the right of Luna Park. This is obviously much closer down to water level. We saw a similar angle, and I said that looks like the Carl Expressway. This is much lower down. I think this is an accepted. Okay, so this is obviously a single shot to catch the fireworks. You've got a lot of distortion from your wide angle lens, like geo distortion. The thing, look, if this was my image, right, what I would do is in software, I would straighten the distortion, because what you've got in here, this is the hidden gem in this photo, right? You've got the reflection of the fireworks in the front of the building. So what I would do is I would straighten that building, and I would crop it so you've just got the fireworks, you've got the building, and you've got those reflections, and I'd cut all the rest of it out, and that solves your problem of all your angles, right? Because that's the hidden gem, but you haven't really emphasised it, if you know what I mean. That's the unusual thing that would make this different to all the other fireworks shots you're likely to see, right? As it is, that's an accepted, because of all the other things sort of going on in there. But yeah, I think by all means I'd have another crack at that, because there's a gem fighting to get out of that. All right, so you've got sailing boat, full moon, nice enough sky. It's a fairly wide sort of an image. The sailing boat's a point of interest. It's not that sharp, but it is a point of interest, and I kind of accept that. I think this, for a nightscape, it fits the definition. Like, you probably couldn't have a better fit for the definition. I don't think technically it's the best photograph we've seen, but I'm happy to give it a credit. All right, so this is Singapore, and I've never been to Singapore, but I know it's Singapore because you see a lot of images of it. On my screen, this is a fairly fairly noisy image. The sky, there's not a lot going on in the sky, and Singapore is that brightly lit that you're never actually going to see that much in the sky. Okay, positive things about the image. I really like this leading line in here. The shapes are interesting. I really like the little person down here because it gives scale to the whole thing. Unfortunately, when you look at it on the higher res screen, there is an awful lot of noise up in the sky. So that will be a credit as well. All right, this is an interesting presentation of this. I actually quite like it because by presenting it as a mono, I'm not looking so much at the tail end, because that's only the tail end of the Milky Way, right? So up in here, there wouldn't be a great deal of colour, but you'd be able to see the Milky Way. By presenting it as you have, you're making me concentrate on the silos and on the images painted on the silos. Now, tonight's theme is Nightscape, but this is obviously taken at night time, and it's part of a nightscape, so I'm kind of happy to shoehorn that into the thing. And I actually quite like the fact that there's a tree that almost looks like it's been trimmed to fit on the end of the silo. I don't think it has. I think that's just an optical illusion, but I'm happy enough to give that a merit, I think, because it's been nicely handled, and it's a very graphic sort of an image. All right, this is another Milky Way shot, looking west. It's fairly noisy. I like the old house, and I like the old fella sitting on the porch with his hurricane lantern. And I like the fact that it's got one of those old reverse chimney things built onto the side that the old timers used to use, which is, it was almost like a drying room, like a ancillary area in front of the fire. It is a fairly noisy image though, so that does stand in its way a little, so that would be an accepted, I think. Interestingly, you've actually captured a little satellite here, either a satellite or a plane. There's two there, so you've either cloned out the trail of the plane or it's a satellite. But, I suspect it's a satellite actually from the angle it's at. All right, so this is a very brightly coloured image. It looks like Barangaroo, probably during Vivid. The noise has been really well controlled. I like the beams of light coming off Barangaroo. The buildings are nicely handled. I can see crowds on the sidewalk when you're looking on this 4K screen. It's pretty nicely handled. That one's a merit. All right, so this is a little bit humorous with Dame Edna looking out of the old-fashioned dunny with a car standing. Oh no, it's a ute on its end. So that's kind of, you know, nice. The colours in the Milky Way are a little bit off-putting. So are there's obviously been something done up in that section of the Milky Way there. So those dark clouds are actually there, but they've been, I don't know what you've done with the contrast. You've turned it right up. Anyway, to me that's an accepted. It's somebody else's work of art. You've made it your own by putting the Milky Way above it, but you haven't done a lot else except light it. And the Milky Way hasn't been that sort of well handled, so I think it's an accepted. All right, the foreground on this one is quite nice. I think the sky has not been handled so well. It's you've succumbed to the idea that you want contrast between the sky and the rocks, so you've made the sky sort of a real bluey sort of a colour. There's no other colours in the stars except white, and the actual cloud in the Milky Way is blue as well. So that one's going to be an accepted. All right, now this is an interesting shot because when I first glanced at this, I thought, oh yeah, it's very, very noisy. However, having said that, I don't think you've got much of an alternative to having a very noisy shot. This has obviously been taken from a boat, looking at the Opera House. We all know whereabouts in Sydney Harbour this is. It's probably New Year's Eve. You've got some nice colours in there. You're standing here. You've had to use a fairly fast shutter speed because it's a fairly low light situation. When you take all of those things into consideration, I actually think you've done pretty well. This is a photograph with a lot of moving pieces that you've had to make a lot of decisions about fairly quickly, and I think you've done pretty well. That's a credit. But on this screen here, there is an awful lot of noise down in here, and that's very dominant in the image when you're looking when this is lighter as it is on my screen. You could definitely do something about that noise with some software, and it would make it into from an average sort of an image to something outstanding. All right. This is you're trying to show me the building, and it's obviously an old, decrepit building. I'm not sure where it is, but with the camera angles and things, it looks like it's not long before it's going to fall over. You're struggling with the sky a little bit behind it. It is kind of, it's a little bit, well, it's out of focus, and that's not such a biggie, but it's very, very noisy, and there's some, on the 4K screen, can you see it up there? I'm not sure whether you can. Oh, you sort of can. There's some interesting lines. So up there in the sky, you can see there's a line that goes up and then goes across like that, where you've done something in software to try and save it, and it's left some artifacts there. So that's going to be accepted. I think it needs a little more work to bring it up to a competition standard. All right, this is an interesting shot. Again, the colour in the sky is a bit sort of washed out, but it does look correct. There's really nice detail in the foreground, and the framing, the choice of the framing to have the framing right around is kind of nice. That's going to be a credit. All right, this is an interesting shot in that you've probably given me a little bit too much foreground. I can see that there's a couple of satellites in the sky, and you've got the Milky Way where you've composited this together. There's a couple of little rough patches there that could be done a fair bit better than they are. Like, for instance, there's water up here that just kind of disappears. Now, can you see what I mean? That water is way above the water level here, if you know what I mean. Which sort of puts you off a little bit. And the sky is a lot noisier than the foreground is. So, again, this needs a bit more work. This one's accepted. All right, so this is an interesting, and this might have been a happy mistake, who knows. It looks to me like my guess would be that you've put your camera on a tripod, you've gone to do an exposure, and you've moved your camera vertically like that. Now, I would say that it looks like, if it's not a mistake, it looks like it may have been intentional, because these lines are much darker at the top and the bottom, which means that during the exposure, it spent more time there and more time there than it did travelling between the two, right? So, look, I'm happy for people to have a go at this sort of thing, and the result is actually quite pleasing. I'm happy to give that a credit. All right, this is interesting. I like the mist. There's a little bit of movement in the stars in the top right, so you can see that it's night time. The tree, I think, may have been illuminated a little bit too much, but it's nicely done. There's a little bit more detail on my my monitor. You can see up here, there's actually detail up through the black up there. So I'm happy to give that a credit. All right, cityscape at night time from, you know, the top of a hill or something overlooking, where is that, Hong Kong or somewhere? Yeah, it looks like Hong Kong, doesn't it? All right, it's a nice enough image. It's sharp, a telltale of a wide-angle lens. It's kind of sharp in the middle. It's going off to the left and the right. You're starting to lose the sharpness and the definition and whatever. That will be accepted. And there's also, I can see that there's on my screen, there's a few dust bunnies up the top there in the sky. There's a dust bunny here. So it's one of those things, you're on holiday, you haven't cleaned your sensor. Another cityscape. This looks like, what, Kuala Lumpur or somewhere, with the Petronas Towers, aren't they? I think you could lose a little bit of the foreground. I can see that you're trying to show me, you know, that there's almost two stories there: the glittery city and the not so fortunate down in the foreground. I think there's a little bit of too much foreground that is going to be accepted. All right, moonrise or moonset, probably moonrise. It's an interesting shot. It, you know, it obviously is a nightscape. The birds in the foreground there on that little point. On this, I can see their birds. On that, you know, you can sort of work out their birds. The colour up there is actually nicer than it is on this monitor here. I think this monitor, it could be, this whole image could be turned down just a little, but that's okay. That's accepted. All right, this is a difficult one because I sort of roughly know where it is, but the problem I've got with it is that I can see what you were trying to do, but the whole image is soft. I don't think there's anything that's actually sharp. How's it looking up there? It actually does look better up there than it does on the monitor. There's absolutely zero in the image that's sharp, and I understand that at night time it's hard to focus, but this is A grade, so I would expect that you'd have worked out by now, even at night time, how to get your focus sharp, and it's not soft enough that I think you're trying to do it intentionally. So I think that'll just be an accepted. All right, this has a lot of problems, but I like your intention, and I can see what you're trying to do, and you're standing outside Luna Park, and you've taken the shot. Luna Park itself is quite sharp. This foreground that you've got around it, the whole thing's very noisy on the monitor. This is a bit soft. I'd have perhaps darkened it down, just used, you know, a burn and dodge tool, which is really simple, and just darkened it down a little bit, but still left enough detail that I can see what you're trying to achieve with it. That's an accepted. All right, this one's sharp as a tack, and there's virtually no noise. It's obviously been a I'd say probably just at a guess, maybe a 5 or 6 second exposure, something like that, maybe a bit less. It's a classic scene. I've seen it a lot before, like this type of shot. You do see a lot. You're on holidays, whatever. Looks like the Mediterranean somewhere. That's going to be a credit. All right, so this is an interesting shot in front of a freshwater lake. How you've managed to not get much of the stars reflected. Looks like you had a fair bit of high clouds, so the sky wasn't playing. But as soon as you defocus the stars a little bit, you start to see more of those colours coming through. And that, again, can you see now the colour of that star? That's Antares. That's that one that I was talking about that I use as a bit of a marker to orientate myself so I know which way is up on the Milky Way and which part of the sky it's in and all that sort of stuff. Because as the Milky Way comes up and rolls over and then sets again, I can tell by the relationship between Antares and the Milky Way what part of the sky it's in, and therefore I know roughly what time of the day or night you took it. So it's an interesting image. There's some beautiful colours in it. It is a little bit soft though, so I'm probably going to go with a credit on that, I think. It seems that you've shot through clouds and with a little bit of finessing when you were there, that high cloud, you can actually make the Milky Way look really quite spectacular. Anyway, next. We've got to keep moving. All right, so this is a lighthouse over the thing. You've done some light painting and you've got a really, really huge moon behind it. So this is one of those things you see on Facebook where they say the moon's going to be the size of a dinner plate. Look, I can see what you're trying to do. It's got a nice misty feel about it, and you've obviously put a fair bit of work into it. The shot of the moon itself is, well, it's weird how it's kind of overexposed on one side but not on the other. But that's obviously you've done that in processing, and I don't know what the reason is you've done it, but you've done it because that's what you'd like to show me. I think that's accepted for me. Yeah, I think it's an accepted. All right, this is an interesting shot. Obviously, a composite. I have got a shot of the Milky Way like that I made by accident because my zoom lens slipped while I was doing a long exposure. But it's an interesting effect, and that's the Paul Wild Observatory by the looks of it. Yeah, look, it's nice enough. I think that the way you've put them together, you probably could have turned this down a bit. It's a little bit sort of jarring the way it's just kind of sitting there. So to me, that would be an accepted. All right. This one again, we've got the ramshackle shack in the foreground with the Milky Way behind it. You've cut down on the foreground in this sort of an image, so that's good. The sky is dominating. The colours in the Milky Way are actually quite accurate and quite nice, which is good. I think as far as tonight's theme goes, that's probably a credit. All right, you guys can't see this, but in mine, I actually do have detail right through here. It's very subdued, but it's there. Now, I know there's nothing in the sky except colours, and it would have been lovely to see a few stars and things. And I can just detect, I think I can see some stitch lines, but again, that's being hypercritical. I think this one it's very simple, and I think it deserves a merit. I can see there. Can you see there? And there? There's kind of these lines. That's what happens as Photoshop stitches it, and it's kind of really hard to avoid, actually. It can be done, but it's difficult to avoid. All right, so this is an interesting take on the Opera House. You've tried to do something different, and I tend to try and try and reward that. There's a, again on the high-res screen, there's a few, well, they're actually JPEG lines, so I can't really, in the conversion of JPEG, the sky's kind of a bit wavy, but that's okay. The Opera House is probably not quite as sharp as it could be in that there's a few ghosty, halo-y things on it, but again, I'm prepared to overlook that because I think that the way you've handled the lighting on the, it looks like a hand railing, like a decorative hand railing type thing that you get along the old shore. I think you've done well. That's a merit, I think, even though it has got some faults. All right, another cityscape, quite nicely done. You've handled there's not a lot of, you know, weird angles and things going on. That's also a merit. Okay, so that looks like, you know, the London Eye or the Singapore Eye, or it's one of those big Ferris wheels. You've taken a bit of a time exposure. You've done pretty well. There's not too much noise. There's a few little dirty spots from your sensor that would be fairly easy to clone out. You can't really see them up there. That's a credit. All right, this is a fairly simple shot. You've given me a nice foreground. It's obviously been raining, so the sky's cloudy. It's the AMP building with the new AMP, so it's looking over Circular Quay, so they are. I know where it is. And, I know where it is because I went to the top of that building when I was 8 years old, and it was the second tallest building in Australia. That's going to be a credit. Another shot of the church in New Zealand, the Church of the Good Shepherd, or whatever it's called. We see a lot of these images. This one is not particularly sharp. Look, it is really hard to get night shots critically sharp if you don't practice doing it. The Milky Way, the colour's quite nice, and the colour on the church is fine. That's going to be accepted. All right, so the sky on this one is a little bit noisy, but this is another one of these Harbour Bridge shots. You've got it's a nice compromise exposure in that you've taken a bit longer so that you're getting everything nice and sharp, and you've knocked a little bit of the detail out of the water. I think you've got a nice mix of foreground and subject. I think you've done pretty well. I'm happy to give that one a merit. All right, so this one is potentially it's a really, really good shot. It's very noisy and it's very soft, so there's a lot of detail down in here, right? But up here, it's extremely soft. So that tells me that you've probably not got the focus right. Your focus is hit in here somewhere, and your depth of field has been such that you know, I mean, it's night time, so you've got your aperture wide, right? You've opened up to get the light. You've got some really nice colour. You just kind of missed the mark on the buildings a little bit, but look, if I step back here and I sort of squint a little bit, I think it's a credit. All right, so this another one of these traffic shots. We can just see the harbour, the top of the harbour bridge peeping out there. It's a section of road that we're often sitting in the car pointing that way, sitting in a traffic jam, right? So yeah, look, it's nice enough. I probably would have cloned out. See that crane on top of that building? On my 4K screen, that's quite bright, and it goes straight out. It's cut off basically. That's a credit. I would clone out that crane with the top of the building there, and there's a little bit of noise creeping in. So if you threw some noise reduction at it, I think you'd have a better image. But the image itself is actually quite nicely done, and I can see a bit of the Opera House creeping out there too now that I'm looking at it. So, oh, was it? Thank God for that. That was a big section actually. And look, the problem, that's what I said to Peter, the problem with having so many images is that you can't actually sit there and analyse the image and give really solid feedback. You've got to sort of just pick out some points and move on. And I'm not, as a judge, I'm not comfortable doing that. I think that if you've taken the time to prepare your image and put it up, I think solid feedback is the fair way to go. All right, let's have a look. All right. Gee, it's a tough call, isn't it? Do you know what? I actually think, and a lot of you are probably going to go, no, but I actually think that from a technical point of view, the simplicity of that one makes it image of the month. I mean, it was close between that one, that's right. It was close between that one, and the two on the end there, really. But that one, if it was cropped across there, I think that would have been probably a better shot. This one gets it simply because there's nothing that I can technically fault with it, all right? As far as a nightscape goes, it's about as good as it gets, except maybe, do you just want to bring it down, Pete? Oh. The only technical fault I would say with that is that you could get rid of that, all right? Get rid of that, and you've got a pretty tight image, really. A different night, I might have gone a different way, but that is a nice image, though, as well.
And congratulations, Jennifer, for the Brooklyn Bridge. And the merits, we have Bennelong Bay by Keith Mahoney, City Celebration, Narelle Weiser, Coonaplin Night, John Tibbin, Crown Sydney at Night, Bruce Armour.
That was also a very good shot technically. In fact, most of them technically are pretty good, so which is why they're merits, I guess.
Outback Glow, Tony Hicks. Ring of Opera fame, Rob Clark. Shanghai by Night, Jane Borg. And View Across the Bay, Jennifer Lees. That's 2 merits, Jennifer. And the credits are Across the Bridge, David Malaford. Anzac Lines, Rita England. Bloke's World, Karen O'Connor. Bombo Nightscape, Paul Prozos, thank you. Branch Down, Tom Brazel. Bridge Under Starry Night, Jane Borg. Coleroy Moon, Alan Taylor. Collars in the Night, Neville Thorogood. Fired Up Sydney, Karen O'Connor. Gostwick Chapel, Gary Elliott. A Codate, Ran Fuchs, yeah. Hawkesbury by Night, Alan Taylor. And Menaola Night, Rita England. Mary River at Night, Jeff Higgins. Old Ado Sky, John Tibbin. Singapore Skyline, Narelle Weiser. Sydney in the Rain, Neville Thorogood. And Vivid Sydney, Bruce Armour. White Line Fever, Peter Lees. And the acceptances, A Light in the Dark Places, Peter Kisson. A Vivid Night, Paul Milliken. A Vivid Night, Paul Milliken. Alja Bakina Bridge, Ian Moore. Clyde River by Night, Steve Castle. Coat Hanger, Maria Brea. Cockle Bay, Peter Lees. Country Night, Keith McLaughlin. Yep, McLaughlin, thank you. Dame Edna, Keith Mahoney. Devil's Marbles at Night, Jeff Higgins. Glen Davis Shale Oil Ruins, Rob Clark. And Gurul Bay by Night, Steve Castle. Hong Kong Nights, Rob Brea. That's all. We've got a lot of, haven't we?
Yes.
KL Hormers, Akami. Lake Mood, Tony Hitz. Light on the Rocks, Peter Kisson. Luna Park, David Melfont. Moonrise Composite, Tom Brazel.
I'm glad he called it composite.
Yes. Narrabri Actor GC Explosion, Roger King. That Church, Keith, we've got this, McLaughlin. And that's the last one.
That's probably the only one that I got the title right. Okay. So these are open, colour and B grade, yes? Okay. All right, so these are, this is actually a nice, being B grade, this is a nice shot. These are the hawks that are hunting at the leading edge of a fire. It's a nicely done shot. A little bit of confusion in reading it there because you've actually got two birds, one in the foreground, one sort of behind it, which, you know, you can't really help, but it's there. But it's telling me a nice story, so I'm happy to give that one a merit. It's B grade, isn't it? Yep. All right, so this is a fairly typical shot of a surfer standing on a rock shelf with the wave crashing in front of him. That's a nicely done shot for what it is. The fact that you've desaturated it helps, I think, in this case. I'm not sure what time of day it was taken, pardon me, but I think it makes it a nice image. It may have been interesting to just try and, in a shot like this, to put the surfer a little bit off centre. Now, I know that you'd probably lose, you know, you probably want to keep this because you think it's very spectacular. I'd have maybe cut it off there just to move the surfer offline a little bit, because there's nothing else symmetrical about the image. So, but that's just me, and it's each to his own, and to me, that's going to be a credit. All right, a moon shot. These are quite tough to take. I've got loads of them. You've taken the moon shot. You've saturated it quite heavily, and it exaggerates the differences in the mineral content on the surface of the moon. They're not as easy to take as you would think. I think it's quite nicely done. Looks like it's just through a big telephoto lens. I'll give that a credit. All right, this is a nice shot. Looks like you've been on a trip to Antarctica or down to the bottom of New Zealand or somewhere. nice line of birds there across the foreground. I would be inclined to maybe take a little bit off the top and a little bit off the bottom of this one. It's a digital presentation, so you're not restricted by the shape. It's not like you're printing it. So if I made it more of a panorama, took it maybe just to below this, and then took about the same off the top, take it to sort of just up there, maybe just a smidge higher, I think it would benefit from that. But otherwise, it's nicely handled. The exposure's nicely handled. Again, we're talking about B grade, right? So I would give that a credit. All right, so you've got the Lagoon Nebula and the Trifid Nebula. So that's M8 and M20, Messier 20 and Messier 8. I bet whoever took it didn't know that the judge was going to know exactly what he was looking at. If you show me a Milky Way photograph, I can actually show you where these two nebula are. Looking at that, I'd say that's got to be through about a telescope or a long telephoto. The fact that if you look at how the stars are very sort of round down in here, and they're starting to elongate up there, tells me that it could even be a big telephoto lens. But aside from that, it's a nice attempt. You've got a fair bit of detail in the lagoon, which is the big pinky one at the bottom there, and you've managed to not lose the hydrogen. That red is called hydrogen alpha. What happens is a lot of people, if you're not using a modified camera, you tend to, this gets a really gaudy colour, and you get a real cyan colour in here, which you're right on the edge of. So you've done well. That's going to be a credit as well, I think. Cymbidiums. It's a nice enough shot. It's more of a record shot. I would say to you that it's would have been nice if you could have come in a little bit close. There's a spider up in there. See, up there. If you'd have stood there for long enough to notice the spider, you could have sort of zoomed in on that, and that would have made for an interesting shot. That's accepted. How many images have we got? I haven't actually given any merits yet, but... So what happens if I don't give a merit? I didn't ask that, did I? It doesn't matter? Good. So that's going to be accepted. That's a back shot of the Cymbidiums. You've done... the reason it's only accepted is, okay, it fits into the thing, but you haven't... basically what you've done is you've walked past and gone, oh, look at those nice orchids, click. Which, if you're going to be a photographer and you're going to be in a camera club, you need to start thinking more about showing me something about those that I haven't seen before, and I don't really need to see the pot or the air conditioner. All right, having said that, this one is a merit. Judges see lots of sunsets and sunrises, okay? But you've given me something a little more here. You've given me some nice textures, some nice rocks. It's nicely framed, and I've got some beautiful light down in here, and you've given me just enough shutter speed so that I've got some movement, but I can still actually see the texture of the wave. So it's a nicely done shot, and it's a nice balance between freezing it and making it completely milky. So well done. All right, that is going to be an accepted shot. I'm not sure that the horizon is entirely straight. I may be wrong. On this monitor, it looks just a little bit skew-if. It's a shot of a tree and a reflection. It's fairly nicely exposed, and that's about it, really. All right, this is an interesting shot. I quite like, street photography is a lot more difficult than it looks, and I actually quite like this shot. I'm actually going to give this one a merit as well. I've got a lot more detail than you can see here. There's a bit of detail here. I may even have cropped that out and concentrated on this fella here, right? I don't necessarily need to see all the other people. It reminds me really of a lot of the early street photography, the Cartier-Bresson type stuff is really difficult. It's a lot more difficult to do than you think. Go out and try and do it. It's really tough. So whenever I see something that's like this that I like, I try and reward it. And we're in B grade after all. Yep. Yep. Okay. Well, I think, as much as I hate to say it, I think the sunset's going to get it. The other two are nice enough images, but there's little, if anything, technically wrong with the sunset image. The other two, this one is it's a little tougher to read, so that's like a mark against it. And this one, I think there's a few little things need to be done to it to bring it up to level. That there's really not a lot that you would want to change about it.
Congratulations to Terry Lilly for Port Stephens. Cooked dinner, Robert Denchnik. Streft, Matt J. Kranchnik. Okay. Please tell me if I'm not pronouncing them correctly. Credits, Fearless, Matt J. Kranchnik. For Mineral Moon, John Bajowski. Gallimont in Svalbard, Barry Frost. Lagoon and Triffid Nebulae, John Bajowski. Orchid, acceptances. Orchid 1, Barry Ormond. Orchid 2, Barry Ormond. Reflection, Inner Spell.
So you've got to remember, as a judge, I'm up here just making it up as I go along. So I apologise for any mistakes that I make, but they do happen. But let's go. And these are A grade open colour. Okay. Geez, you're going to make it tough, aren't you? All right. That's an accepted. The only reason it's an accepted is because the first thing I looked at was the top of that little telegraph pole there, and it's the only thing that spoils it. If you'd have cropped that out, it probably would have made it up to credit level. All right, it's nice to see a rodeo shot where I'm not just looking at a big wall of cloud. It's nicely done. The background's not too cluttered. Everyone seems to be watching what's going on. I can even tell that the guy in the middle's the guy with the microphone. That's a credit. All right, these two guys fighting. It's nice and sharp. I can't see any reason why that wouldn't be a merit all day, every day. All right, this, assuming that you didn't hop in another biplane and take photos, it's likely to be a composite, but that's fine. Your selection of a background's really nice. I can't see any technical difficulties with it. That's going to be a merit. There's likely to be a few merits in this lot. All right, that's a lovely shot. I'm not sure why I've got horizontal lines on it. It's almost like you scanned a print or something. Anyway, the colour choice is interesting. I'm going to give that one a credit. We've got another rodeo type shot, peak of the action. He's about to leap on the unfortunate cow's head, and you can see he's going to grab a horn in each hand and give it a good twist. It's a nicely done shot. That's a merit. Looks like up my way, Caves Beach. That's going to be an accepted. Nice enough shot. I like his hurricane lamp. It looks very sort of set up, but still a nice shot. It's a little bit softer than I would expect around the fella's head and face. If you look at the hurricane lamp, seems to be sharper than his head does, which tells me the camera probably locked onto the hurricane lamp. That's an accepted. All right, an interesting shot. I don't do a lot of these, this sort of work. However, I think it's been nicely done, and the fact that you've put that lighter rectangle over the reflection just breaks the image up and makes it a little bit better than just a simple 180 reflection. That's a credit. What's his name? Kurt, whatever his name is, Kurt Fernley or whatever his name is. Dylan, that's it, yep. Nice enough shot. Looks like a grab shot. You were there. It's a little bit noisy up around the top and the background. I'm going to give that an accepted. Dylan Alcott, that's his name, isn't it? Yeah. Okay. So nice osprey shot. Grabbed hold of the fish on his way back home with it, him or her. It's nicely exposed, nicely framed. The square presentation suits it nicely as well. That's a credit. All right, you've got a pelican shot. Up our way, we tend to get a lot of pelican shots. He hasn't done a very good job, that pelican, it looks like he dragged it through the sand for seasoning before he's thrown it up in the air. I think that'd be a horrible, crunchy thing to be eating, but anyway, fortunately I'm not a pelican. You've exposed it really well. There's detail in the black. There's detail right across the bird's breast. Even the slight discoloration down on the base of his throat. You've got all the colours up around the beak and the eye. Nicely done. That's a merit. Okay, this is a nice portrait. Obviously a set, studio lighting, nice background, all that sort of stuff. You've done a nice enough job with it. She looks happy enough to be there. She's making good eye contact. The hair's nicely brushed out. The dress is unusual. It's very evenly lit. I tend to go more for when I do portrait type studio work. I actually like there to be a dynamic range across the image as well. So lighter, darker darks and lighter lights, but it is what it is, and you've done a pretty good job. I think that's a credit. All right, bee eaters. We got loads of bee eaters. You've caught him on the wing with a fly in his beak. I'd say there's probably a perch just out of view in front of him. He's coming up to land. He's about to do his breaking motion. Yep, it is a male bird. I can tell it's a male bird because of there's a little fine feather that sticks out and it actually goes just out of frame there, which is takes a slight edge off it, which is going to make it a credit rather than a merit, and that's, like I know you're all saying to me, oh, that's harsh, but at Maitland Club on a normal month we would have 6 rainbow bee eater shots of bee eaters catching, because we've got bee eaters all around us. In fact, they've just arrived back in the last week from up north. So I'm fairly critical of the old bee eaters, but it's a nice enough shot, and it's just these things you've got to. It looks like you're at about 1/2000th of a second. You need to be up around 1/4000th to get them really, really tack sharp. Okay, lion shot. He looks like he's having a bit of a growl, a roar. It's the middle of the day, very harsh light. So you've lost a lot of the detail on this monitor around his face. Around here, it's just because it's harsh. It's the middle of the day. It's a difficult shot to get when you're in the middle of the day like that and the sun's directly overhead. So that's an accepted. Again, the kestrels. So I've got lots of shots of these. This one's a little. You need to use a high shutter speed, which you've done, which means high ISO. So you get a little bit of noise under the wing case and all that sort of stuff. I would give that one a credit because he's just coming into land and there's not a heap going on. Sorry, Peter, I keep giving you the score and then going back and saying extra things. All right, this is an interesting mono shot. It looks like terrace houses or something similar, and it's a bit of a. I mean, you might have taken this out of a train or something like that, right? It's an interesting bunch of geometric patterns, and you can see the little chimney pots. It's an unusual shot, and I like the mono presentation. And it's funny because it looks kind of ye old worldy, and you've got a whole range of things. So I like this shot. I'm actually going to give this a merit, but the reason I'm going to give it a merit is because I've got this really old. This looks like it's been that way since 1950. But then I've got a hot water system, I've got some TV aerials, and I've got you can't see it on the projected screen, but up in that corner, there's a satellite dish. So it actually tells a really good story as well. So it's a more interesting image than a lot I've looked at, simply because it's a bit different. And technically, it's very well done. All right, this is another image that, as we were going through, kind of stood out. There's potentially a lot of things that you could say, oh, well, you could improve this or you could improve that. But I really like the mist. I really like the fact that there's a line leading down, and then just in that down here, again, it's not so obvious here, but there's actually a person there, and there's a bit more detail in that person on my monitor than there is up there, and the colour toning is slightly different on this monitor than it is up there. That's a merit. All right, so this is obviously a set-up shot, and it's cleverly done. There's something that feels not quite right about it, and I'm not sure what it is. Like I can see all the obvious things, right? They've got the anatomical arm in there next to the woman, so that, and she's got a more dead than dead look on her face, like I'm dead. And And these guys are all fascinated by the plastic art. And the fact that he's got a hat on reminds me of that Swiss guy that was doing the autopsies live on telly a few years ago, which was kind of macabre. Anyway, it's interesting. It's a merit just because of the technicalities of it. I don't like the way it's set up so much, but I've got to pay credit where credit's due. Technically, it's a very good shot. All right, so I quite like this as a portrait. This is a little bit, so I'm going to give this one a merit too. So this illustrates better what I was talking about before. See how there's a dynamic range in the lighting across that way as well? So she's got bits here that you can see where you can see a lot of information. On my screen, you can see all the detail in here, but it is quite dark and it gives it a more dynamic look. So a lot of people go and buy studio lights and they come in a kit and you've got two, right? 2 lights is normally one too many. You can normally do everything you need to do in a studio with 1 light and a reflector. Very, very rarely do you need to go to 2 lights. This looks like they've had one light off here, a softbox. In fact, if I look closely enough, I can probably tell you what shape the softbox is because of the catch lights in her eye. And it looks like they've got an overhead light as well, like a little beauty dish or something sitting on top that they've turned down, which it's nicely done. That's a merit. The exposure's really good on that fur too. All right, so this is a on-camera flash. Looks like a natural daylight shot. It's nicely done, and she looks happy and nice and relaxed. That's a credit. All right, this is sort of a moody shot. Again, I can see a lot more detail than you can see there. So I've got, there's a footpath down here and there's a railing in here. I'm going to give that one a merit just because it's a beautifully framed, moody shot and the noise has been really well controlled. You've probably noticed already that I like dark photographs and I like negative space in photographs. All right, this is, I will call this a brave shot because it's misty. Looks like you're on a platform at maybe, 2 a.m. in the morning, and not only were you there at 2 a.m. to get this coal train going past, but you were there with that. And that's probably scary. So So well done. I'm going to give that one a credit. All right, this is going to be an accepted. It's a nice enough black and white shot. The reason it got knocked down from a credit is because of the big black. That in a black and white shot, that dust spot on my sensor that grabbed my eye straight away. And I'm sort of thinking that the interest in this is where the 3 guys are in the middle there having a bit of a confab. I may have actually cropped this side of it off and tried it just to see if you've got the resolution to get in a little bit closer, because that's where the interest is. All right, that's a nice shot. Often judges will say, I don't like the white background, but I think it really suits it well. I'm just trying to work out what sort of a bird it is. Is it a testicular or something like that? Yeah, maybe. Anyway, it's a nice shot, and that's a merit. I don't know whether I might have moved it just a little bit off centre, but the detail in the birds is on this 4K screen is really, really quite nice. So, merit all day. All right, I'm going to be happy to give this one a merit as well, simply because I can see the intensity in the guy's face. You lucked out getting a guy with a clear visor where the other 2 have got black. if I was going to do anything about this, I might have put just a nick more space out there, but that's just a technicality. It's not. It's quite nice how it is. Next. All right, I like these sort of shots too. Again, this is like that street kind of shot. This is not as strong as some of the other ones I've seen. The interesting interaction between the lady on the phone and the one in the foreground here is nice. That's a credit. All right, this is these, looks like the sand dunes in Namibia. Nice enough, good bit of detail. I'm a little bit concerned about the line across on the 4K screen. There's a line right across the top of the sand dune, across here. There's like it's kind of like a halo, but it's not quite, and I'm not sure what's going on, but that's okay. Look, it's a nice sharp shot, and it's fairly well balanced, so I'm happy enough to give that one a credit. All right, this one is only going to be accepted. The whole chipmunky thing or squirrel it's a bit soft, unfortunately, which means that because it's soft, it does blend into the background a little. I can see what you're trying to do, and I suspect that you're probably doing it with a big long telephoto lens and you've zoomed in on it after the fact. And it looks like you've used a bit of topaz sharpening on it as well. I can see again, there's telltale signs that when you look at it in high res, you can sort of see where the software's picked out things that it thinks need to be sharper than other things. But yep, so that's accepted. All right, this is a nice, it's obviously an aerial shot, but it's kind of very abstracty looking with the salt pan around what's left of what looks like a dam. This one's going to get a merit. I like the square format. I like the colour in the dam that contrasts nicely with the reddy orangey dirt around it. Yep, it's a nice shot. All right, this is an interesting thing. I'm going to give this one a merit as well. This has had a lot of work done to it. There's textures and there's a lot going on in this image. What kind of makes it for me, as I'm not a huge fan of this sort of photography unless it's done extremely well. I don't personally do it actually that well, but you know what makes it? This grungy fingernail. That's what does it for me in that image. The author, whoever it does, it's little details like that lend authenticity to a confected image like this. Right? I do a lot of bonsai trees. It's very, very hard to make a newly made tree look 150 years old. And it's the little subconscious telltale things, and that is a fantastic example. If you see on her other hand, she's got the same thing. She's got little grungy marks and little things all over the place. It's those little details that'll make a confected image like that look really good. It's those little details that other image we saw of the autopsy scene, they were missing in that autopsy scene, right? There was no dirt, there was no grunge, and I know it's supposed to be an autopsy, but if you've ever been into a hospital there and you're halfway through an autopsy and you've flayed the skin off an arm, there's stuff splattered around, trust me, you know. So anyway, for that style of image, that's a very, very good one. All right, I like these sort of images as well. The fact that the guy is just getting hammered, he's just about to be washed off his board and find out what the bottom of the ocean looks like. Really, really quite like it. The only thing I might say is perhaps a little bit off centre. That's a credit all day. All right, so here's another made-up image, like set-up image. I can see what's going on. This one's going to get a credit. It's perhaps, pardon me, it doesn't have the same feeling of authenticity that the one, even though the one a few images ago looked more fantastic, and this is probably closer to what you'd expect to see in a real image, this one feels a lot more confected than the other one does. So that's a credit. All right, I really like this image. This is a lovely image. I don't know how you get into a mosque and get an image like this. I'd like to be able to do it. The silhouette, the shapes, the repetitive patterns that you get in mosques, the red lines on the carpet for people to line up, the feeling of isolation. It gives you a feeling of isolation, but it also gives you a feeling of, connection with God, if you like, because that's what the person's there for, and they're there on their own. And the fact that they're there on their own tells you that they're not there because everybody else is there and it's the thing to do. They're there because they really want to be there, which gives it a feeling of sincerity as well. So it's an interesting thing. It's a very nice image, and that's going to be a merit for sure. All right, these sort of images are a lot of mucking around to do, and this is a nice enough image. I wonder how it would look sideways. It sort of, I think presenting it that way is probably better. It'd look a bit odd the other way up, but look, nice image. Well done, well taken, high key, good colour, good control on everything. That's going to be a merit as well. It's a lovely taken image, virtually no distractions, nice reflection in the floor which fills up that space. Shutter speed's right, lighting's right. That's a merit. Okay, this is a nice image of this style of thing. It looks like one of the beaches up the north coast, actually, that I've been to, but it could be anywhere along the coastline. The wave crash is small enough in the foreground, so it doesn't just detract from the texture of the rocks too much. You got that nice side lighting and that rosy glow to the light that you've captured on the trees behind. So all round, it's a really nice image. It's up against some pretty stiff competition tonight, though, so that's a credit. Is it? Oh, lucky me. Well, to be honest with you, it's not actually that hard. There's some lovely, lovely images here, right? So just put them all up again, all the merits, like you were. Yeah, so look, there's some really nice images. We're running out of time, aren't we? Oh, are we? Okay, so I mean, when I look at these, that one is technically fantastic, sharp as a tack. That's nicely put together. I like the fact that I hate those rodeo shots that you're seeing everywhere where someone's learnt how to use the smoke brush and the whole thing's just smoke, right? I like to see a bit of context in it, but then you've got the problem that it clutters things up and you get distractions. That's a nicely balanced version. Well, that's a pelican, but it's nicely taken. So that was really nice. I like that. I like this, but this one's going to get it, all right? Just because there's a lot of... It's a very simple image, but it implies a lot of story and a lot of emotion. I mean, the one next to it, this one here, had stacks more work done to it, and the work is extremely well done. You know, like you really can't you really can't understate how much work and how much finesse and how much control that author has over that image. It's just delightful. It's really, really well done. But if I was going to put one of these images on my wall, it'd be that one. I hope you all disagree with me. Well, the thing with photography is, if everybody saw things the same, we'd wind up with a whole bunch of photos that were exactly the same. So, oh, it is, and even see the little plant at the top there that breaks the pattern up, right? You couldn't have asked for that to be in a better spot or a better place or to do a better job. It just kind of creates just a little bit of disruption there, which is important. The Japanese have a word for that, where they don't like things to be perfect. They like for there to be a flaw in everything, and that's just perfect.
Well, congratulations, Sandy O'Farrell, for the prayer. Great image.
Is Sandy O'Farrell here? No, I just wondered whether it was a set-up or not, that's all. I mean, it's not going to change the outcome,
Okay. The merits are Big to Big, Diane Travola.
Another nice shot.
Bristol F2B, Gary Elliott. Catching, William Stewart. Flipping Manny Mavi. Longhorn Rooftops, Monica Mulder. Metro, Hormuz Hakami. Modern Rembrandt-inspired painting, Cone Vanderbilt. Natalie Wood, Diane Gilioris. Dina, sorry. Night Lake, Patricia Schumack. Playing, Maria Brer. Round the Bend, Peter Vanderkoy. Survival, Diane Travola. And the cartographer, Diane Gilioris. Dina, sorry, my apologies.
Yep. Yep. Yeah, it's a lovely photograph. I don't actually like a lot of these type of things, but when I see a really good one, like Michelle Kennedy on the Central Coast, she sets up all those animal shots and she does a really fantastic job of them too. And like I said before, to me, it's the little details in this that make the image. It's the little grimy fingernails and the fact that the clothing matches beautifully. The quill looks worn. It looks like it's been used. It's not a brand new feather, right? Yeah, it's a lovely image.
Tutti Frutti, Paul Proses. Wheelchair Basketball, Marilyn Coventry. Airborne, the credits. The credits are Airborne, Peter O'Brien. Calmness, Peter Robson. Double Standards, Carol Abbott. First Catch, Manny Mavi. Girl in Pink Feathers, Code Vanderbilt. Gotcha, Rob Brer. Landing Gear Down, Ian Moore. Natural Woman, Monica Mulder. Night Platform, Patricia Schumack. Rush Hour, Rolf Mende. Sovoldi, Morn John O'Farrell. The End, Rolf Mende. The Jeweller, Peter O'Brien. and Zenith Beach South, Peter Vanakoi.
So it was Zenith Beach, I thought it was.
A Foggy Sunrise, Marilyn Coventry. These are acceptances. Caves Beach, Carol Abbott. Cigar Smoker, Sandy O'Farrell. Dylan wins again, William Stewart. I Am the King, Harry Kishin. Pie in the Sky, Harry Kishin. Squirrel with Acorn, John O'Farrell. And that's the last. And my apologies for any mispronounced words there and names.
I'd like to thank Brad for his very good timekeeping. Brad likes to give you a lot of commentary and a self-professed gas bag. And it was, I think, a little tough for Brad to keep the commentary down a little, but he still gave quite a lot of good feedback for people, and I'd like to thank him for that. And also, because he's come a long way. He's in a little place just outside of Cessnock, so coming down to judge for us, I think, is I really appreciate that he does that for us.